Why don't you tell me the impact of the race radio ban on yesterday's race? Did you notice any differences?
In general, so far this season, I think it has made the racing a little bit more dynamic. At a bigger race like this, where we have several large teams present, when breaks go up the road, it really makes everybody pay attention to see what teams have riders in those breaks, what riders from those teams are in the breaks, and you have to really be a lot more aware of where they are in the GC. But I think what it's going to make everybody do, what it's definitely made us do, is try and plan out as much as we can about all the different scenarios that are going to go on in the race. We're not surprised when something happens.
All right, and how were you keeping track of the break up the road since you were defending the yellow jersey?
We got pretty good at taking time splits, and we had help in the feed and another person kind of close to the start finish line giving us splits, but we were just trying to keep everything in sight, and to the team's credit, we did a great job of staying pretty close together, and so when we needed to add another body to the front, it was a lot easier to grab that person and get them in the rotation instead of, it's a lot easier when you could say, hey, get to the front, but we didn't have that luxury, but luckily, because of our positioning, we didn't have to worry about that.
Robin, why don't you tell me if there was any impact of the race radio ban on yesterday's race? Did you notice anything?
Well, I did notice that the race seemed a little bit slower and less entertaining, actually. I find the race radios kind of provide a little bit of humor involved in the race. Not only is there's sometimes good information, like for the first probably 10 minutes of the break, I wasn't exactly sure who was in it for the other team, so I had to kind of do some investigating around, chatting with some of the other teams, asking who do you have in there, because sometimes it's really hard just to see from the back of someone who it is. As the season goes on, you get a little better at recognizing people, but I think in the short term and in the beginning of the season, it's going to be a little hard to recognize new faces and jerseys, so there was a little bit of ambiguity on who was actually in the break. Interesting.
And then you had Alex in both breaks for pretty much the whole race, so how do you know the time gap? Who was giving that to you?
Well, we depend on people in the feed zone. Our staff in the feed zone was giving us time gaps. The random spectator on the side of the road would kind of throw out a number, and that's you're kind of risking it by going with that. But and also when you go through the start finish, there was a clock giving you giving time gaps. So coming to the last lap, I felt pretty confident that Alex and that break were going to stick. So
okay, what type of race do you think it would be impacted more, coming up in the schedule?
I think a sunset loop at Redlands is definitely going to be something where race radios are going to come into play, or the lack of race radios might come into play. On Team Vera Bradley Foundation, I'm pretty confident that we have good riders and experienced riders, that it's not going to be that big of a deal. Like, we've already talked, the team's talked, and we feel confident we kind of know what we would do in situations. So, besides just not hearing Lisa, yell at us, scream at us, random thoughts, then it's a good thing, I think, for us and our team. But it's going to be missed, I think. Yeah. When someone has a flat, a mechanical, it's either we know about it or they're going to be chasing. So
all right.
Yeah.
Meredith, tell me about the impact of the race radio ban on yesterday's race. Was there anything?
No, honestly, I think the women dealt with it really well. I think the race was aggressive. It was very positive. Everybody was racing just as we normally would have without, or had we had the radios. And I think it was a race on instincts, and everybody did what they were supposed to do. All the teams did their job well. There were a couple times if a team missed the break, they got organized right away, and it really forced riders to communicate with their teammates, which is, I think, a very good thing in cycling, that you need to have that communication among your teammates on the road rather than just relying on everything coming from the car. So I never would have noticed anything yesterday that we, without the radios. Maybe a few times we could have gotten time checks a little more frequently, but other than that.
Yeah. Wow. So how were you getting time checks then?
The official on the moto was riding up next to us and giving us time checks. And then as far as having riders or teammates in the break, you just kind of had to hope that they were thinking for themselves too. There would be a few times I'd want to go to my radio and say, okay, you realize this, or especially with Amanda, when she was in that break at the end, because she was the highest placed rider in the break, and so there were just a few things going through my head, that I hoped that she was thinking about as well.
So, since you have a lot of younger riders on the team, so do you go through that before the race with them?
Yeah, you try to go through as much as you can, but there's so many things that you can't overload them either. So you really have to pick the most important things for them to focus on, and hope that those are the things that stick.
And do you do debrief afterwards?
Yes,
about
yes,
that?
and I think that's going to be just as important as pre-race meetings is the post-race meetings, to go through everything that went well and the things that didn't go well. And I think also everybody's going to have to be a little bit more critical, positive criticism, just so that we realize mistakes and can learn from those. And everybody's going to have to accept that everybody makes mistakes, and we're going to learn from that. So if there's something that's said after a race that could have been done better, it's just a stepping stone for the next race to make it right.
So Reid, why don't you tell me the impact of the race radio ban on yesterday's race? Did you notice anything?
Not really. I mean, we only had 3 riders anyway, so we didn't have a director in the car or on the sidelines at all. So it's we're just kind of here for fun more than anything. But it's hard to know what it's going to be like. I mean, in these small races, it doesn't seem to change thing much. It seems like you see more signboards on the side of the road and a lot more yelling from directors at the riders of what's going on. But it didn't seem to affect the race very much yesterday.
So it sort of became a huge crit at that point.
A bit, yeah. I mean, the race itself, it's a 12-lap, road race, circuit race anyway, so it's sort of that way by nature, I think. But
yeah. Well, and was the peloton getting any time gaps from? Or was it depending on the DS on the side?
I didn't see many official time gaps, but I saw several unofficial time gaps. Yeah. I mean, every time we came through start-finish, we would see it on the board is all, but nothing besides that.
It's interesting because the field held the break at pretty much 50 seconds for a long time. So they must have known the gap at that point. Somebody must have known. Or?
Yeah, I mean, every 7 miles you get it going through the start-finish, so I guess that's a good way to keep it in check. And we could see him pretty well too at several points on the course. So.
All right. Do you think Sunset Loop will it's going to make a difference there?
I think it's going to be a similar thing there. I mean, you get to see your director every lap anyway, and so. I don't think that things are going to change all that quickly on the loop to make it a huge difference.
Rachel, did you notice any impact in yesterday's race with the lack of the radio ban?
Yeah, I think it certainly makes a difference. It makes it harder for the directors to communicate with the riders. You have to get a little bit more creative. We're fortunate with Tina and I having 2 of us, plus we had people in the feed zone. We were actually communicating by phone, and then as the riders come past us, we've got information from like a third of the way around the course that we can then relay to them.
So, and do you think there will be impact like in Redlands also, or do you think it's going to be more when we have a long road race, not a circuit race, that it's going to be noticed more?
I think it's going to be in both. I think the riders that have teams and good strong captains who can think on the road and are maybe used to either racing for themselves, they understand the racing, I think are going to have a benefit over maybe riders with strong teams with strong riders, but those who need more direction. I think those who are able to think quickly for themselves are going to start to shine a little bit more.
All right, so I saw you guys with the whiteboard. So any specific color on the whiteboard? Does color mean anything?
That would be telling. We don't want to be giving our secrets away.